You grab it off the shelf every week, maybe twice a week. It's in your pantry right now, sitting there like it belongs, like it's part of being Australian. But when I started looking closer at what's actually inside these jars, we trust so much. Something didn't add up. And what I found changes everything about how we see breakfast in this country. Walk into any Woolies or Coles across Australia and you'll see them. Row after row of spreads we grew up with. The ones our parents bought. The ones we now buy for our own kids. They're so familiar, so normal, that we don't question them anymore. We just assume they're fine, safe, maybe even healthy, depending on which label you believe. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Some of these spreads that live in almost every Australian home aren't what they seem. Not even close. I'm not here to tell you what to eat. I'm here because I started asking questions most people don't bother asking. Simple questions, like, what am I actually spreading on my toast every morning? Where does it come from? And why does the ingredient list look nothing like what the packaging promises? What I discovered surprised me. And when you see what I'm about to show you, it might surprise you too. Let me start with something you've probably done 1,000 times. You open the fridge, grab your favorite spread, and make breakfast. Maybe it's for yourself. Maybe it's for your kids before school. Either way, you trust what's in that jar. You trust the brand. You trust the bright packaging and the health claims printed across the front. But trust and truth aren't always the same thing. And in Australia, we've been trusting some products that don't quite deserve it. There's one spread in particular, one that's practically a national icon. It's been in Australian homes for decades. Generations have grown up with it. If I asked you to picture a typical Aussie breakfast, chances are this spread would be part of it. But when you actually read the label, when you look past the marketing and see what's really inside, you realize we've been sold a story, a very profitable story. And the truth? The truth has been hiding in plain sight this whole time. Now, before we get into specifics, let me be clear about something. I'm just a regular Australian consumer. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not here to diagnose anything or tell you this will cure or cause disease. What I am is someone who started paying attention. Someone who decided to read beyond the front label. And what I learned made me rethink everything sitting in my pantry. The spread I'm talking about, the one that's probably in your home right now, markets itself as wholesome, as Australian, as something that's good for you and your family. The packaging shows happy, healthy people. The brand has built an entire identity around being quintessentially Aussie. And we've bought into it. Literally. For decades, we've bought into it without asking the obvious questions. Until now. Here's where it gets interesting. When you flip that jar around and read the ingredients, the first thing listed isn't what you'd expect. It's not the thing the product is named after. Not even close. The primary ingredient, the thing there's more of than anything else, is something most Australians don't even realize they're consuming in such massive quantities. It's sugar, or vegetable oil, or in some cases, both. The actual ingredient the spread is supposed to be made from? That's further down the list. Sometimes much further. Think about that for a second. You're buying a product based on what it's called, what the label shows you, what the advertising tells you. But the reality inside the jar is completely different. It's like ordering a meat pie and getting mostly pastry with a tiny bit of filling. Except we've been doing this every single morning for years, and somehow nobody talks about it. Nobody questions why a spread named after one ingredient is actually made mostly of something else entirely. And it's not just about what's in there. It's about what's not. The nutrients we think we're getting. The benefits we assume come with the product. Half the time, they're barely there. The processing methods strip away most of the good stuff. What's left is something that barely resembles the natural ingredient it claims to celebrate. It's engineered, formulated, designed to taste a certain way, to spread a certain way, to last on the shelf for months without going bad. But is it still the real thing? Not really. Let me give you a specific example. One of Australia's most beloved spreads, and I won't name it just yet because you'll know exactly which one I mean in a moment, contains roughly 60% sugar and oil combined. 60%. That means when you spread it on your toast, you're getting more sugar and oil than the actual ingredient the product is named after. More sugar and oil than the thing you thought you were eating. And this isn't some cheap knockoff brand. This is the one everyone knows, the one that's been trusted for generations. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but it's just a bit of spread. How bad can it be? And you're right, having it occasionally isn't going to ruin your health. But here's what matters. Most Australian families don't use it occasionally. We use it daily, sometimes multiple times a day. It's on toast at breakfast. It's in sandwiches at lunch. It's a snack after school. And when you're consuming something every single day, the ingredients start to matter. A lot. The manufacturers know this, of course. They know we're not reading the fine print. They know we're buying based on nostalgia, on brand recognition, on the story they've told us for decades. And that story is powerful. It's tied to our identity as Australians. It's part of our culture. But culture and chemistry are two very different things. And chemically speaking, what's in that jar is not what most people think it is. Here's something else that caught my attention. The serving size listed on the label. Have you ever noticed how small it is? Most spreads list a serving size of around 15 grams. That's about a teaspoon. Maybe less. But nobody uses just a teaspoon. Not in real life. We spread it thick. We slather it on. And when you actually measure out what most people use, it's closer to 30 or 40 grams. Double or triple the listed serving size. Which means all those nutritional values you're reading, double or triple those too. Suddenly, that small amount of sugar per serving becomes a significant amount. That tiny bit of oil becomes quite a lot. And the companies know this. They have to know. But listing a smaller serving size makes the numbers look better. It makes the product seem healthier than it actually is when consumed the way real people consume it. It's technically accurate, but practically misleading. And we fall for it every time because we're not paying close enough attention. Now let's talk about what happens when you compare these popular spreads to their natural counterparts. The real thing. The ingredient they're supposedly made from, in its pure form. The difference is staggering. Take peanuts, for example. Natural peanut butter, the kind that's just roasted peanuts ground up, contains healthy fats, protein, and fiber. It's actually nutritious. But the popular Australian peanut, spread most people buy? It's been so heavily processed, so loaded with added sugars and hydrogenated oils, that it barely resembles actual peanuts anymore. Same thing with chocolate spreads. Real chocolate and hazelnuts would be one thing. But what we're actually buying is mostly sugar, palm oil, and cocoa powder. The hazelnuts are almost an afterthought. This matters because we're making decisions based on incomplete information. We think we're giving our kids protein when we make them a peanut butter sandwich. We think we're giving them a treat with a chocolate spread on toast. But what we're actually giving them is a significant dose of sugar and processed oils. And when that's happening every single day, across millions of Australian homes, it adds up. It becomes part of why we're seeing the health trends we're seeing across the country. The really frustrating part is how hard the companies work to hide this reality. Not through lying, they list the ingredients, they follow the rules, but through clever marketing. Through packaging that emphasizes what sounds good and downplays what doesn't. Through health claims that are technically true but deeply misleading. Through portion sizes that don't reflect actual consumption. It's all legal, it's all allowed, but it's not honest. Not really. And here's where it gets personal. I grew up with these spreads. They were in my house. They were part of my childhood. I have memories attached to them. Good memories. And I know you probably do too. That's exactly what makes this so difficult to talk about. Because questioning these products feels like questioning part of our identity. Like being disloyal to something Australian. But loyalty to a brand shouldn't come at the expense of understanding what we're actually consuming. Nostalgia is powerful, but it shouldn't cloud our judgment about what we're feeding ourselves and our families. When I started digging into this, I expected to find some issues. Maybe a bit more sugar than ideal. Maybe some preservatives I didn't recognize. But what I found was more significant than that. I found an entire industry built on the gap between perception and reality, between what we think we're buying and what we're actually getting. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me show you what I mean with a direct comparison. If you took 100 grams of natural peanuts, just peanuts, nothing added, you'd get about 25 grams of protein, good fats, fiber, vitamins, real nutrition. Now take 100 grams of the most popular Australian peanut spread. You get maybe 8 to 10 grams of protein, with the rest being primarily sugar and hydrogenated vegetable oil. The protein content is less than half. The sugar content is more than 10 times higher. This isn't a small difference. This is a fundamentally different product pretending to be the same thing. Or look at chocolate spreads. If you made a spread from real chocolate and hazelnuts at home, you'd be using actual chocolate, actual nuts, maybe a bit of milk. The most popular Australian chocolate spread? The first ingredient is sugar. The second is palm oil. Chocolate comes later. Hazelnuts make up roughly 13%. 13% of a spread supposedly based on hazelnuts. The rest is sugar, oil, and additives. But the marketing shows hazelnuts. The name implies hazelnuts. We assume we're getting hazelnuts. We're not. This gap between expectation and reality exists across almost every popular spread in Australian supermarkets. Honey spreads that are more corn syrup than honey. Jam that's more sugar than fruit. Margarine marketed as a healthy alternative to butter, but loaded with processed oils our bodies struggle to recognize. Each one tells a story on the front of the package that doesn't quite match the reality on the back. And the companies can do this because most people never flip the package around. We buy what we know, what we recognize, what our parents bought. We see the familiar logo, the trusted brand, and we assume everything is fine. We don't read the ingredients because we don't think we need to. Because surely, if something was wrong, someone would tell us. Surely, the government would step in. Surely there would be warnings. But there aren't warnings because technically, nothing illegal is happening. Everything is labeled. Everything is disclosed. We're just not looking. Here's what really bothered me when I realized all this. These spreads market themselves directly to families, to children. The packaging is bright and cheerful. The advertising shows happy kids eating breakfast. The implicit message is clear. This is good for your family. This is part of a healthy Australian lifestyle. But when you look at what's actually inside, when you see the sugar content, the processing, the lack of real nutrition, that message falls apart. It's not about health. It's about profit. It's about convincing Australian families to buy a product every single week, regardless of whether that product delivers on its promises. And we've been so loyal, so trusting. These brands have been part of Australian culture for so long that questioning them feels wrong. But think about what that means. We're choosing not to question something because it's familiar, because it's always been there. That's not a good enough reason. Not when it comes to what we're eating every single day. Not when it comes to what we're feeding our children. The truth is, we deserve better. We deserve products that are what they claim to be. We deserve spreads that actually contain meaningful amounts of the ingredients they're named after. We deserve honesty, not just technically accurate labeling designed to confuse rather than inform. And until we start demanding that, until we start reading labels, asking questions, choosing alternatives, nothing will change. The companies will keep making the same products because we keep buying them. So what do we do about this? First, we pay attention. We read labels, all of them, front and back. We ignore the health claims and marketing slogans and look at the actual ingredients. We check serving sizes and multiply them by how much we actually use. We compare products. We look for alternatives that have fewer ingredients, less processing, less added sugar. They exist. They're usually a bit more expensive. They might not spread quite as easily. But they're real food, not engineered food products designed to maximize shelf life and profit. Second, we stop being loyal to brands that don't deserve our loyalty. Just because something has been around for decades doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's Australian doesn't mean it's healthy. We can love our country without loving every product marketed to us as quintessentially Aussie. We can have nostalgia for our childhood without feeding the same things to our children when we know better. And third, we talk about this. We share what we've learned. Because most people genuinely don't know. They're not being willfully ignorant. They're just busy. They're just doing what they've always done. But if enough people start asking questions, start choosing better options, start demanding actual quality instead of clever marketing, the industry will have to respond. That's how change happens. Not through regulation or government intervention, but through consumers refusing to accept less than they deserve. I know this isn't easy to hear. I know it's uncomfortable to realize that something you've trusted your whole life maybe isn't what you thought it was. I felt the same way when I first started looking into this. Part of me wanted to ignore what I was finding, to keep buying what I'd always bought, to not complicate something as simple as breakfast. But the other part of me, the part that cares about understanding the truth, even when it's inconvenient, couldn't let it go. And now you know too. You know that the spreads in almost every Australian home aren't quite what they seem. You know that the ingredients don't match the marketing. You know that we've been choosing these products based on incomplete information, based on trust that maybe hasn't been entirely earned. What you do with that information is up to you. You can keep buying what you've always bought. That's your choice. Or you can start reading labels, start asking questions, start choosing products that are actually what they claim to be. Either way, you can't unknow this now. The next time you're in the supermarket, standing in that aisle looking at rows of familiar jars, you'll remember. You'll think about what's really inside. You'll wonder if there's a better option. And maybe, just maybe, you'll make a different choice. Not because I told you to, not because anyone forced you, but because you deserve to know what you're eating. And once you know, you can't pretend you don't. The spreads will still be there. The marketing will still be bright and cheerful. The brands will still be trusted and familiar. But you'll see them differently now. You'll see the gap between the story they're telling and the reality they're hiding. And that awareness, that simple act of paying attention, changes everything. Because we can't fix what we don't acknowledge. We can't choose better until we understand what better looks like. And now you do. If this made you think differently about what's in your pantry, if you're going to read a label you've never really read before, then this was worth it. Sometimes the most important changes start with the smallest questions, like, what am I actually spreading on my toast? Simple question. Complicated answer. But now you know where to look for the truth.